We could, but when we look at...
No, but what's the threshold for the outlier?
I looked anything over 10 and below 10. Okay, I looked at them all. And, bottom line is when I look at properties that went down or went up, I compare it to the neighborhood, I compare it to the sales, and basically it was out of whack to begin with. Okay, and I move on to the next one. Okay, so it was done.
And then did you do curbside follow-ups? Did you go look at the house where you had these outliers?
We have the data on file. Basically, I look at two identical condos, okay, and there's an outline in the middle of the condo, and that's $100,000 less than the identical condos around it. Okay, so it was an old data problem before.
So wait, so did you go out to answer?
We did curbside on everything and geospan, yes. Okay. And just a point here, I know that I've been in front of this board throughout this process at least 2 to 3 times. I've been in front of the Port Chester School Board. I've been in front of the Rybrook School Board. I've been in front of the Rybrook Village Council. So I know we did some public relations before. This isn't the only one.
Exactly.
So,
thank you for reminding me. That's exactly right. Sorry, did you have a question? Yeah.
My name's Renee Henry. I'm local editor of Ride Patch. I'm not sure if my question is a point of clarification, but you gave an explanation, and maybe it's just a matter of understanding on my part. You mentioned benchmarks that happened at the 6, 3, and 1 year increments. And then you also said that every year these values are certified. So if you could clarify what is the meaning of certification, because I'm trying to understand why there are outliers at all if values are certified every year.
Sure.
Why would there be outliers at all if every year the assessor certifies that the information that's being sent to each homeowner is correct?
Right. Well, actually, Mitchell, why don't you're probably better. And then, Dave, you can take a crack at it as well. First of all, can you talk about the process, what happens every year?
Each and every year, a copy of our assessment roll is submitted to the state of New York, who conducts a statistical review of the values.
No, but sorry, Mitchell, in terms of dealing with the citizens, every year a notice of the value of your home goes out when?
Each and every year, a value of a notice of value is provided to each and every homeowner each June 1st. Anytime there is a change, we have provided them with a written notice explaining the change and outlining to each and every individual what the process is moving forward.
So every June 1st, everybody in the town of Rye receives a certificate or notice of value. And then the third Tuesday of every year, June...
Between the 1st of June and the third Tuesday of each and every year, people are encouraged to submit what's known as a Board of Assessment Review complaint, which says to us, or says to the Board of Assessment Review, that we believe, or I as the owner believe, that the assessment is incorrect. Okay? Understand that the assessment that is provided to each person on or about June 1st represents a value that is historic in nature. It is based upon the previous July, so it doesn't reflect today's value.
And then once every 3 years, the notice incorporates...
Once every 3 years, the notice incorporates what's called a disclosure of change in taxes. Okay, the notice essentially calculates how the change in value impacts your tax bill. Okay, and such a notice was provided last year townwide.
And that was the second time we've done that since the reval. And then the third thing is once every 6 years...
The town is required to do a comprehensive update and recollect inventory and recalculate values.
So what would happen between those annual notices of value that would cause 20% variations?
I don't know that I agree with the comment, but understand that there are a variety of ways people's assessments get adjusted. Okay, through a Board of Assessment review process, through a small claims process. Over time, values have been adjusted based upon market changes, trend changes. As I've already described, values don't move linearly. They move in up and down motions from 2004 to 2000.
But I think that how many properties increased by more than 20% in this last go-around? Approximately.
Off the top of my head, other than ones with permits or just in data, small percentage.
But 100, 200?
Probably about that much.
Right, so
I can get the exact number.
So you have to appreciate that of 11,000 properties, approximately, we can get the actual numbers, about 200 had a significant, those outliers were checked. And so it either is a result of a change in relative value. In the last reevaluation, what happened was beachfront properties, waterfront properties went up dramatically. Those were appreciating faster. In fact, I think they're even still appreciating faster than norm. So since you'd had 40 years since the last reeval, there was big changes. And even that can happen in the last 6 years, because as Mr. Gelfarb said, you have trending analysis, right? You don't really go back and inspect the homes this way you do once every 6 years. Mr. Noto?
People make improvements to their property.
No, but we're talking about outside the
Well, I think
improvements.
the question was what would cause an increase, right?
Well, okay.
So much, is that one of your questions?
But I'd assume if I made an improvement to my property, I would not be surprised.
Right.
Well,
Assessment.
people are always surprised.
Yes.
They may not think the improvement enhanced the value as much. But that would be one item I think they would consider would be an improvement.
I have a question. You said that only maybe 100 or so went up, but Dean is saying that in his area alone, 120 were increased.
Well, first of all,
2000, the prior roll to the current roll,
Mike.
overall.
Dave, get up. David, get up. Dave, get up.
I'm sorry.
You're looking at increases from last year's tax roll to this year's tax roll. And as I explained earlier, if you look at the Byram Ridge where he was talking about, that overall decreased by 1%. So that's
And
not
that's
part
why I
of
was
that.
trying to clarify, Michelle. The land values went up, but the actual
The land
assessments
values
did not go up.
changed from
Did
the
not.
preliminary assessments.
Right.
Okay, we're talking the final
But
product.
even there, they didn't. The assessment didn't go up 20%. The land value may have
The
gone
land
up.
value change, which is a component, but
Right.
again, the old to new is from the prior tax roll
Right.
to the current tax roll.
Right.
And a lot of things take place in all the different phases. Bottom line is, the properties on Byram Ridge overall went down by 1%, not up by 20, which you may be misled.
Okay, I have a feeling Dean's going to come out with a spreadsheet sometime.
Mayor Feinstein?
Now he's going to go look all that up.
First, I want to thank you very much for having this meeting. I first learned about this meeting last Tuesday when we were at the Rye-Town Parks Commission meeting, and as I said to Supervisor Carvin, that none of the members, the elected officials of Rybrook would be able to attend a Tuesday meeting because tomorrow night is our regularly scheduled meeting. So I want to thank you for accommodating our schedule. As you can see, we have 4 members, I think. Where's Michael? Okay, we have 4 members, and the reason we didn't have a 5th is because his child is leaving tomorrow for camp. So we take this very seriously. As you know, Dave Arnold and Mitch Markowitz were at our April 26th meeting. Every single meeting that we have had since those tentative assessments have come out, we have discussed it with the public. I wrote a letter to the editor. I want people to be vigilant, to be assertive, to understand the process, because the process is complex, to say the least. And as Richard Abel said, and I will echo his sentiment, I am also a proponent of reval. I have always been a proponent because I believe in the word equity. And I think the old system was inequitable for many reasons that we don't have to go into. Couple of observations just to clear the record. I think there was a discussion in the Byram Ridge area about the fact that the land value is 25% of the total value. I don't think that's a correct statement until we look at it, so I don't want that to be on the record. I know in other neighborhoods it can be 50%. At least I think in our area it could be closer to 50. So, and I want to talk a little bit about land values. I understand at the end of the day, it's the value, the total value that counts. I still have concerns about land values and what they are, and I was the one who raised it. I'm on the record. You can go to the April 26th meeting. I questioned the land values in Byram Ridge, not because I wanted the values to go up. I wanted to understand the concept vis-a-vis other neighborhoods, because they were much less for the same amount of land, and I couldn't intellectually understand it. There might be reasons why, but it was an intellectual pursuit on my part. And so there may have been tweaking as a result of my questioning and other people's questioning as well. Supervisor Carvin, where I disagree with you that there's not 600 people in this room, and the reason why there aren't 600 people in this room, and even if it was a month earlier, is because, unlike what happened a couple of years ago, the economy has taken a toll. And as I said to you privately when we met last week, 2/3 of the properties went down in value. People actually may have had their values and their assessments decline, and actually it may not be as much as it should have. But as long as people see a decline, they may not come before. So therefore, forget about the 2/3 right there and then. So if we start with 11,000 parcels, approximately 1,500, Mitch, a commercial, give or take?
Yes.
Okay, so then we're down to 9,500. I'm going to ask some questions, so I want to understand the aspects. First of all, you don't have to answer it today. Mitch and I discussed it, but I'd like to know, of the 9,500, because it's really the residential people who came, I'm sure, for the informal more than the commercial. The commercials have their recourse, which is called a tax cert. We have residential called the bar and then a SCAR, and you have to go to the bar before you can have a SCAR. And those are just that's the way it is. I guess you have to drink before you're, well, anyhow, the bar. But in any event, so therefore, if there were, my understanding, 500-600 people informally came before, I would say those were residential. And I'd like to know how many, and I will get this information over time, how many individuals, or I should say taxpayers, actually submitted claims or protests or grieve before the bar. And I'd like to also know, of those individuals or those taxpayers who came on an informal basis, what percentage of those were affected in one way or their assessments were changed. So I think that actually there may be a higher percentage this year than in the past that have grievances, only because the fact that if you look at the fact that it's only 1/3 of the population that would grieve at all. And the other thing is, you might not have as many taxpayers come before, or owners come before the bar, because what I tried to do is what was stated today, is to get out the word that if you make a submission and you grieve, your assessment will not go up in value. I've tried to get that word out, and our board has tried to do that, but I think people were just nervous. So I think actually you're going to see really more of a percentage increase of the submissions, but that remains to be seen. I guess equity is the word as far as I'm concerned. I think the confusion this year has been this whole land value and understanding the concept and the replacement value. And I will say, what was said before, we talk about replacement value of homes, couldn't be like insurance. Well, if I look at the replacement value of my particular property that was used on my assessment, it's not even close to the replacement value that my insurance company uses. So that would be interesting for people to look at the replacement value on your particular parcel and compare it to the insurance replacement. Just that's just an aside. And we should actually look at that and see should there be any sort of even close parity between the two. And I know there are other factors, Dave, that go into that. But once again, I know that taxpayers at this point in time, their recourse is next year. I think that the process has been, the process is only as good as the data. And I just want to make sure that the data is correct. That, to me, is the key. The land values, et cetera, and that's my concern, the fact that we've picked up the right data, that we haven't taken information from the past and not utilize it. And then I know we've picked up 105 swimming pools, and that's great, and tennis courts. Just want to make sure that whatever was available in the past was incorporated into this process. So those are just some of my comments and statements, and I thank you once again for holding this forum.
Thank you, Mayor Feinstein. I was just looking at my email here because we have one answer to one of your questions. in terms of the grievances. Yeah. So this year, this year we have 751, I think it is, Mitchell?
Approximately, yes.
Approximately 750, and of that, about 200 were
250 or commercial.
250 commercial. That's about 500 residential now. That compares 2010, which was 600, 400 residential, 200 commercial. 2009 was 835, 600 residential, 226 commercial. 2008 was 509, 310 residential, 200 commercial. 2007 was 615, 2006 was 841. So basically, right, so 2009, we're less than 2009 and more than 2010. It's hard to draw conclusions from that data. I asked Mr. Marcos, maybe you want to comment on the changes. I just disagree with you on the 600 people in this room. I think that the negative economy actually would foster people to come and grieve. Bless you, sorry. See, I think the negative economy generates it. In fact, what's happened is we're seeing increasingly lawyers teaming up with residentials on a success fee basis to challenge across in Rockland County. They had a 3- or 4-fold increase in challenges and grievance because lawyers were getting involved. People in this difficult economy are trying to hang on to every penny that they can. But let me let Mr. Arnold and Mr. Markowitz answer some of those questions. Well, I guess, do we have any of the numbers that were being requested? How many residential, how many?
I can get those numbers for you.
Okay.
Okay, I know you asked about a half hour before this meeting that the mayor might be asking those, but to try to pull out old and new, who came to a hearing, who went up, who went down, in a half hour I couldn't do it, but I'm more than happy to get that for you. Yep.
Great. Hold on, but just give everybody a chance first, and then we'll come back to you, please. Scott, would just name your address and then for the record. Next.
Thank you. I'm Scott Owen, 2 Hillendale Road in Rybrook. I'm one of those outliers, not to the good side. When I got the first thing, I'm an accountant. I do municipal auditing. I understand all this stuff. But when I got my initial numbers a couple of months ago, and all I didn't go as far as Dean, but as an accountant, and because I do think it's a good idea to have comparisons on the website, last year's values, this year's values, even maybe a percentage column to help, because I just sat there and put all the numbers down on Hillendale and then did all the percentages and tried figuring this stuff out. And on that initial run, I saw that Hillendale had gone down about 8 or 9%, and then I saw mine go up about 15%, so I said, wow, that's a 25% swing. That's not good. I spoke with Vision Appraisal, spoke with someone, gave my points in, and then I got that second letter at the end of May, and I thought, all right, this is good news. They took my suggestions into play. And then I saw again that Hillendale was down, or pretty even, or down 1%, and I saw mine up 28%.
You went up again?
Yes, I went up further. So I am like the highest increase on Hillendale for the oldest, smallest house. I don't truly understand it. The thing that I do recall from the previous appraisal was that, again, I'm not trying to talk to me specifically, but I assume it was an overall thing, was that there was an overall, there was a thing on there known as, and I think it was mentioned earlier, a condition assessment. And based on some of the things where we had the building inspector in my house, they had downgraded my condition assessment from what was called good to normal. I don't know what any of that means, but that affected my assessment, whatever it was, two years ago. So I don't know if, again, that was taken into consideration in this new model. I don't see that indication anywhere on the website. The other thing that I did, and again, not as good as Dean with spreadsheets and everything, but I did do a quick thing, and this was after I had spoken with, as I said, I do, my firm, we do over 100 municipal audits in Westchester, Rockland, Putnam, and I spoke to the assessor from the city of Yonkers, Mark Russell, who I've known for 100 years. And I was explaining to him the process here. And, I just mentioned to him, what are some of the things that I should look for, if I was going to file a grievance. And one of the things he said to look at was, what is the assessed value to your living area, your square footage living area? And I told him, well, based on what they've now put me at on this second number to my, smallest house on Hillendale, one of the smallest houses, they have me at over, $400 a square foot. And he said to me, that's outrageous. So I said, okay. So prior to coming to this meeting, I had just jotted down again, from the website, and I just, I'm an accountant, so, that's what I do. And I went through and I took everybody's assessed value, and I just did Hillendale. I didn't do all of Byram Ridge, Steen. I'm sorry. I didn't have the time for that. But, I looked and I took everybody's assessed value to what it says on the website for their living area space, not their total, square footage, but just the living area. And I'm looking at, and there seems to be one outlier on that somebody's at $700 a square foot almost. I don't even understand that. But most of them I'm seeing in here are in the, anywhere from $260 to $330 to $370 to $380, and there I am at $438. I am the highest on here, other than for two what I would call McMansion houses. I'm even bigger than, I think, the biggest house on Hillendale, which, has, I don't know what the living square footage is, but, I'm at a higher per square footage to living space. And I said, this cannot be right. I have a 70-year-old house that I've done nothing to. So, it just doesn't make sense to me. Then I said, well, let me look at the other houses in the Hillendale Circle. And, I'm looking at these houses, and the house, next to me at 17 Beechwood, which is over 6,000 square feet of living space, and it does have a very high value, $2.5 million. They are at a lower per square footage cost assessment than I am with a 70-year-old house. So I'm just completely perplexed, by this. Whether so I'm one of those outliers. I'm one of those 100 out of 10,000. So that's why I did file a grievance. I didn't have time in the past. I've come before the bar personally, did my own research, presented my cases, and was successful. This year, with work commitments, I didn't have the time to do that, so I did go in with one of these attorneys, to file a case. And I don't like to do that. I want to pay like a fair amount. Sure. But as you were saying, with the 25% for land, my land is over 50% of the value of the house. And frankly, I would probably agree with that because it's an old house. And the bottom line is anybody who's going to buy my house, they're going to take a wrecking ball to it and knock the thing down. Nobody's keeping my house except my wife, and she'll never let me leave there. I'll be there. Someday it'll be the kids' problem. But, so I guess I just want to understand the whole, we've been talking about depreciation here also. While we were here, I emailed my wife, and it said, well, the depreciation on my house is 32%. Now, again, I don't understand what any of this means, other than from an accountant's point of view. So I'm saying, well, after 70 years, it's only depreciated a third. So they're expecting this house to last 210 years. I won't last 210 years, but, so again, I don't understand how that correlates to, new house, new construction. So that's all I want to say. Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming here. Obviously, we can't comment on individual properties. I would encourage you if you had time, if there's any chance you could come by tomorrow. Yeah.
What is that?
12 to 5 here. Where is it, Mitch?
Right here.
Right here in this room, right here. Yeah. So I encourage you to do that, and I appreciate your comment. Hold on, Mr. Arnold, could you comment on the depreciation question?
Another depreciation.
Well, just how do you? I mean, it's a very fair question. How do you?
1941 ranch.
How do you depreciate broad? I mean, how do you? In other words, the same question came up when 1929. Well, you can't depreciate a home, I wouldn't think, the same way you depreciate a factory. So how do you? What are your depreciation models? How do you do that?
Depreciation is based.
Could you pick the mic up?
It keeps falling down on me.
Yeah.
Depreciation is going to be based on the difference between selling prices of an older home in certain condition compared to a new home. Okay? Houses are going to eventually, if you don't maintain them, they're going to fall down eventually. As long as you maintain them, they can go on for 100, 200 years. And if you look at comparable houses, a new house compared to an older house, and you do analysis by that, it's going to indicate by the market what depreciation is going to be. The market is driving that.
Okay.
So,
All right. Thank you. So, hold on, sorry, just want to give everybody a chance to, any other people haven't had a chance to speak, like to speak? Everybody's had a chance to speak, didn't have it, everybody that hasn't spoken, okay, I'll have Mr. Hubert. Just state your name and address for the record, please.
Dick Hubert from 53 Durrell Greens Drive. Mr. Supervisor and members of the board and assessors, I have one very delicate question to ask. Your aerials came up with quite a few tennis courts, swimming pools, which were never reported. Am I correct? And you only caught them via the aerials?
That's correct.
I'd like to know to what extent is there a cheating problem among the homeowners and property owners in the community?
That's not a fair question.
Mr. Markowitz? Well, actually, I think, I got to say, go ahead, Mr. Markowitz.
I will.
Well, let's not call it a cheating problem, but I guess the question is, why do you believe that there were 105 swimming pools out there that were not reported? What do you think the problem is?
Combination of factors ranging from lost information to undiscovered information to, I'm sure some of them nobody had a record, but the fact of the matter is that we looked at the aerial photography and you could see the swimming pools. We compared what we saw.
No, but why didn't we have it before we did the aerial photography?
I'm not 100% sure. Okay, to be perfectly honest, I believe that some of them were dropped along the way, okay, but I can't swear to it.
Mitch, does it say on the literature that went out to the public, does it ask, do you have a swimming pool, do you have this, do you have that, do you have a garage, a detached garage, does it say that on there?
The answer is it states that, and we have asked people who received a data mailer to tell us anything that is different what actually exists is different from our inventory.
Yeah, but I think, you don't. Just to be clear, I don't think you ask if they have a swimming pool. You show them what they have.
You tell them what our inventory is,
right.
And we ask them, in the event that we do not have it correct, please tell us what's wrong and return it to us.
So the ones that came back to us, how many came back with people adding on things as opposed to taking things off? The percentage.
I don't have that exact number. I would be willing to venture a guess that it's substantially less than the number of people who told us we have overstated their inventory.
Okay, thank you.
And I think that there's, you allude to an important problem, and I mentioned this at the last meeting. And that, in Argentina, if they discover that you've put a pool in and you haven't reported it, they will not only tax you, but they'll sign a penalty tax to you. And quite frankly, I think there is some level of responsibility amongst the constituents to try and help us get it right as well. Now, I appreciate people are busy and they're probably not focused on it, and that's why I ultimately rely on the people that have been over-assessed to come in or gotten it wrong or overvalued to come in.
So then I guess my question would be going back to the COs and stuff, because I know when I put my pool in, I had to get a certificate of occupancy, which then went back to you guys, and you raised my taxes. So wouldn't that show up somewhere along the line, unless they totally put it in illegally?
It would, but understand the records go back in truth, to 1967.
For people who put it in prior to that, older, you're saying?
Not sure I can answer that directly, but what we do know for sure is that there are things that are unrecognized in the inventory, and we're trying our best to address those and find those and be fair and reasonable with everybody, and we're doing our best to get it right and get input.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry, I think, did you want to come up? Please.
Lillian Sands, 27 Hillendale Road. I just wanted to say that the aerial views are really so incorrect. They put me down with like 5 bathrooms and 5 bedrooms, and I only have 2.5 bathrooms, the house was built in 1948, and I've done nothing. So I think it's really like crazy that from the sky, they're telling me what I have, and they don't even ask you. No one came around to say anything. They're depending on me, of course, to send back that, hey, I only have 2.5 baths. So I think the aerial views are terrible, and maybe I do